LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the March 13th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I picked out 40 of the weekend's best clips for what should be a really educational show for you all tonight. As usual, my clips come mostly from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the Big Five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, and I add my media criticism and political analysis to the clips I take from the corporate media to make this a fair use video that criticizes and analyzes politics and media, so that I've transformed this into what should be a new product that you can watch and you can even support as a Patreon patron. I put a link down in the video description. You can support my videos, especially for all the times they're not getting monetized, like some of the debates I've covered in the last couple weeks. If you want to see what topics I'm covering, I've described them down in the video description, and if you're watching this as a recorded show, I put time indexes down there so that you can skip to the next topic that most interests you if you're getting bored of one topic. I've also put a link down there to this clip list of the 40 clips. The notes are sometimes hard to understand, but you can at least see the topic and the network and who's appearing in the clip and generally what they're saying. So if you want to follow along with the clip list that I'm using to organize the show, you can check that out. The three topics I'm covering, there's the Democratic side of the 2016 presidential race, the Republican side of the 2016 presidential race, and then I have one clip at the end about the possibility of a Supreme Court nomination sometime in the next few days. I want to start, as usual, with political comedy. I got some political comedy from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher and from Saturday Night Live last night. I'm going to start with one of the new rules from Bill Maher, where this is on the topic. So I'm starting with the Democratic side this week, and I'll get to the Republican side that has more clips, and then all those Donald Trump clips will come at the end. I have several Bernie Sanders clips for the Democratic side, but I'm going to start with a clip from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. Like I said, his new rule, where he's talking about the threat of the purity test in the Democratic Party, the Bernie or bust people, which I will discuss after you watch that clip over here.
Finally, new rule: Batman and Superman have to explain something to me. Why are you two fighting? You're supposed to work together. I saw it on my footy pajamas. It's unsettling to see two beloved mythical figures go at it. It's like watching Jesus beat up a unicorn. And I think the same thing when I see Democrats these days. You two also need to work together so you can stop the greatest supervillain of all time, Orange Crush. Now, it was an exciting week for us left-leaners because with the win in Michigan, the Sanders campaign, which I have been saying is offering America a new kind of deal, has shown that Americans are still considering that deal. But I feel I should say something about a growing movement called Bernie or Bust, where Bernie supporters pledge that if it's Hillary, they'll stay home or vote for the Green Party. On their website, they say they're revolting against the plutocracy. No, actually, you'll be helping elect a plutocrat who's revolting.
And that's really true. I've tried to say sort of the same thing on my broadcast over the last several months, or even over the last year, that for those of you who don't really like Hillary Clinton, who really would rather vote for Bernie Sanders, that if you don't vote for Hillary Clinton, if Hillary Clinton ends up being the eventual nominee, you're going to elect Orange Crush, the supervillain Orange Crush, which I actually used as the thumbnail for this video. And for those of you who don't like Hillary Clinton, one of the reasons that I think Bernie Sanders has been successful in this campaign in helping you vote for Hillary Clinton is because he's really moved Hillary Clinton over towards his issues. And that was something that was kind of satirized in this fake Hillary Clinton ad on Saturday Night Live last night that I thought was kind of funny. Down in the video description, there's a link to the video on YouTube where you can watch the entire Hillary ad yourself. But I've taken about 30 seconds or so where you'll get the general idea over in this clip.
I know you millennials. You're fired up. You're angry. And I'm angry too. Because the top 10% of the top 1% control 90% of the wealth in this country. And I've always said that. Ever since I was a young boy growing up in Brooklyn. Oh, Brooklyn. And when it comes to that darn Wall Street, I've always believed no bank can be too big to fail, no executive you know the rest. It's that famous mobilizing sentence that works on you guys that I've been saying this whole time. So thank you, millennials, for lending your support to the biggest outsider Jew in the race, Hillary Rodham Clinton. There's a lot of work to be done, and that is why I am sick and tired of hearing about my own damn emails.
So I thought that was a pretty effective parody ad. You know, I've criticized Saturday Night Live a bunch over the last several months or even years since Tina Fey and Seth Meyers left, and I think their writing has gone down a little, but I thought that particular ad was funny, and it showed basically what is pretty well recognized amongst the pundits. I think it was Andrea Mitchell said on Meet the Press today in a clip that I didn't take that Bernie Sanders has won the message primary. Even if he doesn't end up getting the nomination, he's moved Hillary Clinton over to his message. Now, you may not trust Hillary Clinton to stay on that message once she gets the Democratic nomination, but it's hard to argue that she hasn't moved pretty much all the way over to Bernie Sanders' positions. I mean, there are a few differences. But I also like that little part at the end where she said she's sick and tired of her own damn emails. And before I move on to the real serious news analysis clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows, I want to show one more political comedy clip. And this is Bill Maher in his monologue making fun of the way even Jorge Ramos over at the Univision debate was really harsh on Hillary Clinton on the emails, and the way it's, at least according to the facts of the email scandal so far, is pretty much overkill on the part of Jorge Ramos. I thought so as well, but here's Bill Maher's commentary on it in his monologue on Friday in this clip.
Yes, and boy, they won't let up Hillary on the email stuff. Jorge Ramos said to her, if you get indicted, will you drop out? Okay, just can we review this here? First of all, she had a private server, which all her predecessors as Secretary of State had, all the government officials have. None of the things she did were illegal. All the emails were not classified at the time she sent them out. But the question we have to keep asking her is, will you be taken alive? And and can you guarantee that your DNA is not on that knife they found at O.J.'s house? Is it? We don't know until we ask.
So, yeah, like I said, I thought those jokes were kind of amusing, and they were pointing out the ridiculousness of the email scandal, at least so far. I mean, maybe more facts will come out. Maybe this FBI investigation will go somewhere that I couldn't predict from the facts that I know so far. But based on my experience as a criminal defense attorney and what I've seen so far, I just don't get what the scandal's about still. Now I want to move on to the actual news analysis shows and no more political comedy. And actually, these first two clips are really quick. They're first the CBS Battleground Tracker poll showing where Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders are in the upcoming states, I think 3 of the upcoming states, and then I'll contrast that with the NBC polls. Now, remember, the Real Clear Politics average for Michigan that Bernie Sanders won last week, Bernie Sanders was behind, I think, 21 points in the Real Clear Politics poll. He did not win in any of the polls that were taken in Michigan. So you can take the polls with a grain of salt a little bit. I think in the last couple weeks I said that these polls are kind of like 5 or 10 day long-term weather forecasts where it's information that can be useful, but you can pretty much be sure it's not going to happen exactly that way, and there's also a pretty good chance it's going to be very different from what's predicted. And with that in mind, I'm going to first show the CBS Battleground Tracker poll for the Democrats in a few of the upcoming states here.
CBS News Battleground Tracker has Hillary Clinton up almost 30 points over Bernie Sanders in Florida. In Ohio, the former Secretary of State is at 52% compared to Senator Sanders at 43%. Illinois shows a much tighter race. Senator Sanders is up 2 points over Secretary Clinton, 48 to 46. And we go now to...
So yeah, that was the CBS poll, and then you can contrast that to the NBC Marist. Is it Wall Street Journal? I know it's NBC Marist poll, at least, over in this clip.
Hillary Clinton leading Sanders in all 3 states. She's up 61-34 in Florida. Clinton has a 20-point lead in Ohio, 58-38, but both campaigns dispute that one. And it's much closer in Illinois, where Clinton leads by just 6 points, 51-45. A lot of Democrats believe Rahm Emanuel backlash is helping Bernie Sanders there. We're going to get to the Democratic race later, but we're going to start.
So it looks like the state that Bernie Sanders has the best chance of winning is Illinois, as you saw from those polls. But based on what happened in Michigan, it's not like any of them are completely out of reach. I mean, basically Florida and North Carolina are not going to happen, but Ohio and Illinois and Missouri, any of them are possible, even though they're all pretty unlikely, except maybe for Illinois. But I guess we'll find out on Mini Super Tuesday, coming up this Tuesday. Now I want to move on to actual clips of the Bernie Sanders interviews from this morning. There were no Hillary Clinton interviews, so I don't have any Hillary Clinton clips, but I have 9 clips of Senator Bernie Sanders, starting with a question he answered over on CBS's Face the Nation this morning, talking to John Dickerson about the big surprise in Michigan. And but even though he won Michigan, Hillary Clinton ended up getting more delegates on last Tuesday's contest. So John Dickerson asked about that and how he's going to win if that keeps going on over in this clip.
A little bit here on these election day. You had a big surprise win in Michigan, a real momentum booster. But at the end of the day, Hillary Clinton got more delegates. That's happened on almost every election day we've had. If that keeps happening, she's going to get the nomination.
Well, John, to everybody's surprise, when we began this campaign, we were 3% in the polls. We were about 70 points behind Hillary Clinton. Since then, we have won 9 states, 8 of them by very large margins. One in Michigan was very tight. Now, last week, all of the pollsters predicted that we would lose Michigan by 15, 20, 25 points. Well, we ended up winning. I think we have a lot of momentum in Illinois, in Ohio, in Missouri. I think we're going to do better than people think in North Carolina and in Florida. So we're looking forward to a very good Tuesday, and we're looking forward to winning the Democratic nomination.
All right, we'll talk about it after those results. Thanks so much for being with us, Sen.
And then now I'm going to show Bernie Sanders answering kind of a similar question in a similar way. I try to avoid duplication, but you'll see there's some slight differences that here in this answer to George Stephanopoulos on ABC's This Week This Morning, where George Stephanopoulos asked him, where's the Michigan Lightning going to strike next? You'll see, I think Bernie Sanders says that he's going to do better in Illinois, Missouri, and Ohio than he's going to do in North Carolina and Florida over in this clip.
You surprised her and everyone in Michigan last week. We've got these big votes coming up in Ohio, Florida, North Carolina, Illinois, and Missouri this week. Is lightning going to strike again, and where?
Well, we have done some rallies in the last few days. We've been in Ohio. We have been in North Carolina. We have been in Illinois. Turnout is very strong. I am sensing, George, that we have a lot of momentum. We've got a lot of energy. And if, as has always been the case, there are large voter turnouts, we'll do well. We have now won 9 caucuses and primaries, 8 of them by double-digit victories. So my view is that if there's a large turnout in Ohio, a large turnout in Illinois, North Carolina, Missouri, I think we're going to do very well. I think Florida is a tougher state for us.
Okay, Senator Sanders, thanks very much for joining us this morning.
And so that's Bernie Sanders giving his list of states again and showing which one he, even in that one, admits he's not going to do well in Florida. I'm going to show sort of a similar question, not so much concentrating on what's going to happen this week, but on how he's going to have a path to win the nomination, given the way the delegates have stacked up. And you'll see he actually talks about convincing the superdelegates. This is over on CNN State of the Union, talking to Jake Tapper on how he's going to win after being behind, even with the Michigan win in this clip.
You'll permit me one horse race question, sir. Hillary Clinton leads you in pledged delegates by a wider margin than the one Obama led Clinton in 2008. Tell us the path to how you beat her in pledged delegates and win the nomination. What states will you win in a landslide, thus changing the basic calculus?
Well, you know, Jake, as you know, a lot of the states that have come up so far, and I should tell you, we have won 9 primaries and caucuses, most of them by very wide margins. Most of the states that came up, and I think where Secretary Clinton has gotten today, most of her delegates are in the Deep South. And we have not done well there. That's absolutely true. We have not done well. But now we're heading into areas of this country where I think we are going to do better. I think we're going to have a good day on Tuesday. I think we're heading out west in the next weeks and months in California. Obviously, a lot of delegates there. State of Washington, state of Oregon. We're going to do well in Montana. I think we're going to do well in Hawaii. And I think we're going to do well in New York State. And adding that up, there are a lot of delegates there. Also, Jake, I would say that as the campaign progresses, and if we do well in a number of states, and if the general sentiment becomes that Bernie Sanders is the candidate who will defeat Donald Trump, and all of the polls, virtually all of the polls, have me doing better against Trump than Hillary Clinton, I think a lot of those superdelegates who are today pledged to Hillary Clinton may say what's most important is defeating Trump or the Republican nominee. Bernie Sanders is the candidate to do that. We're going to swing over to Bernie.
All right, Senator Sanders, I will see you later today. And you at home, you can join me, Senator Sanders, and Hillary Clinton tonight for the CNN TV1 Democratic Presidential Town Hall in advance of Tuesday's critical primaries. I'll be moderating a conversation between Senator Sanders, Hillary Clinton, and voters here in Ohio. That's this evening at 8 p.m. Eastern here.
So you can check out that CNN program. I think they're rerunning it. I have it recorded. I haven't watched the town hall. It's not a debate. It's an interview by Jake Tapper with the two candidates separately on a bunch of issues. That's their town hall, which is, I don't usually do the clip roundups on those, just on the debates. You can look back at my clip roundups from the couple debates I covered this last week. I want to now move on to a couple questions that Bernie Sanders answered that aren't horse race questions about how he's going to win. These are policy differences with Hillary Clinton. 2 questions on that, and then I have several questions from Bernie Sanders responding to the whole Donald Trump controversy and Donald Trump blaming Bernie Sanders for the protesters disrupting his rallies. But first, here's Bernie Sanders responding to something Hillary Clinton said about how Bernie Sanders wasn't there when when Hillary Clinton was fighting for health care in the 90s. And I will discuss that a little more after you watch Bernie Sanders' answer to that question, talking to Jake Tapper on CNN State of the Union this morning. Over here.
Your rival Hillary Clinton went after you this weekend on the issue of health care reform. Take a listen.
We're going to pull together and stand up against those powerful forces. And I always get a little chuckle when I hear my opponent talking about doing it. Well, I don't know where he was when I was trying to get health care in 93 and 94, standing up against the insurance company, standing up against the drug companies.
Well, what's your response? And more broadly, what did you think of Hillary Clinton's management of the health care reform effort in the 90s?
Well, I think that, Secretary Clinton is getting a little bit nervous. She lost last week in Michigan. I think she understands that the momentum in this campaign and the energy is with us, and that we have a good chance to win a number of states on Tuesday. By the way, I think we have a photograph out there somewhere of me standing literally right next to Hillary Clinton in her efforts to bring health care reform back in the 1990s. So what she's saying is not entirely accurate. But what I do say, and what I have said throughout this campaign, is that while the Affordable Care Act has done a lot of good, we've got to go further. We have got to join the rest of the industrialized world, guarantee health care to all people, take on the drug companies who are ripping off the American people in an unconscionable way, charging us the highest prices in the world for medicine. 1 out of 5 Americans can't even afford a medicine. So I believe, as I've said throughout this campaign, that health care is a right of all people. We've got to move to a Medicare for all health care system.
So, when I covered the debate between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, I think it was on Wednesday night, and I covered it in a clip roundup that I did on Thursday night, I noted that Hillary Clinton's attacks on Bernie Sanders tend to be more disingenuous. They tend to spin things inaccurately. It's not like Bernie Sanders is the perfect candidate and he doesn't have anything in his record that can't legitimately be questioned, but that thing about healthcare, the problem Hillary Clinton has is that Bernie Sanders' healthcare plan is single payer. It's what people on the left generally, the more left you go, the more you like Bernie Sanders' plan, and Hillary Clinton is just trying to come up with fairly bogus arguments why she's better on healthcare than Bernie Sanders is, which doesn't really work with at least with the Democratic base. It might work better in the general election, but that's why I think that Hillary Clinton is engaging in that kind of bogus attack from that last clip. And then in this next clip, Hillary Clinton made this weird gaffe at the Reagan funeral, like claiming that Ronald and Nancy Reagan helped bring up the topic of HIV and AIDS in the 80s, and it's really the opposite of the truth, and Hillary Clinton had to apologize. And here's Jake Tapper asking Bernie Sanders about it, and he, says she apologized, but still kind of zings her a little bit on it. This is, like I said, talking to Jake Tapper again this morning on CNN's State of the Union over here.
Hillary Clinton provoked something of a backlash on Friday from some of her supporters in the LGBT community after she praised Nancy Reagan's work on HIV and AIDS. Take a listen.
It may be hard for your viewers to remember how difficult it was for people to talk about HIV/AIDS back in the 1980s. And because of both President and Mrs. Reagan, in particular Mrs. Reagan, we started a national conversation when before nobody would talk about it, nobody wanted to do anything about it.
Hillary Clinton has since apologized for those remarks and said it was a mistake. What did you make of that?
I just don't know what she was talking about. In fact, that was a very tragic moment in modern American history. There were many, many people who were dying of AIDS. And in fact, there was demand all over this country for President Reagan to start talking about this terrible tragedy. And yet he refused to talk about it while the AIDS epidemic was sweeping this country. So I'm not quite sure where Secretary Clinton got her information. I'm glad she apologized. But the truth is, it was not President Reagan and Nancy Reagan who were leaders in talking about this issue. Quite the contrary. They refused to allow that discussion to take place. They didn't get involved in it while so many fellow Americans were getting sick and dying.
Yeah, that was pretty weird that Hillary Clinton was so far off base. I don't know. In her apology, she said she was thinking of stem cell research and Alzheimer's research. But, that's the whole thing with the Reagans is they're for stem cell research and Alzheimer's research because of Ronald Reagan's problems with that. I think the Reagans eventually started talking about HIV and AIDS when someone they knew, Rock Hudson, came out saying that he had AIDS. But there was a long time when they weren't talking about it, and it was really detrimental to the entire epidemic, which Bernie Sanders pointed out there. And you can let me know what you think down in the comment section about why Hillary Clinton made that weird gaffe at the Reagan funeral. Now I'm going to move on to the final 4 clips of Bernie Sanders responding to issues raised by Donald Trump and the violence at the Trump rallies. I'm going to show a whole bunch of clips on that when I get to the Republican side of the race, including some news reports that give you some more background on what happened. But this first clip I'm going to play is from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where George Stephanopoulos follows up on a question both Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders refused to completely answer at the debate that I covered from last Wednesday. And I covered their answers to this question as to whether Donald Trump is racist. And for some reason, neither Hillary Clinton nor Bernie Sanders will explicitly say he's racist. Although if you listen to Bernie Sanders' answer, he might as well have said he's racist, because his argument is all the reasons why Donald Trump is racist, even though he never specifically says he's racist in answer to George Stephanopoulos over here.
Democrats are taking even stronger language than you've used this morning. Marcia Fudge, Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, calling Donald Trump a racist. Mayor Bill de Blasio of New York this morning saying Mr. Trump behaves like a racist, speaks like a racist. Of course, Donald Trump is a racist. Are they right?
Well, look, this is a man, you will recall, a few years ago, who led the birther movement. That was a movement that tried to delegitimize the presidency of Barack Obama, trying to claim that the president was not born in this country. A funny thing, George, you know, my father was born in Poland. I'm a son of an immigrant. Nobody has asked me for my birth certificate. Were there strong racial overtones to try to challenge the legitimacy of President Obama? Of course there was. But I think what we are seeing in the Trump campaign is not only racist attacks, but what you're seeing is attacks on Muslims, on women, on veterans. To attack Senator John McCain because he was a POW is crazy. To insult Mexicans and our neighbors to the south, calling Mexicans rapists or criminals. This guy, there was a big debate in the United Kingdom Parliament of whether or not he should even be allowed to enter the United Kingdom. This is a man who is dividing up this country in very serious ways, frightening ways. And I think what we are doing is my campaign is getting him nervous. I understand that because the last national poll had us 18 points ahead of him. Some state polls had us even more ahead of him. So I think you got a guy who is getting very, very nervous.
First, you have to get by Secretary Clinton.
So you can see there that Bernie Sanders gave all the reasons that Donald Trump is racist without ever saying he is racist, as I explained before I showed the clip. And then in this next clip, I want to show how Bernie Sanders responded to Donald Trump's accusation that Bernie Sanders is responsible for the disruptions of the Trump rallies. You know, yesterday I uploaded an 80-second clip where Donald Trump first came out with this weird accusation that Bernie Sanders and his supporters were responsible. Now, Bernie Sanders has responded to that, and of course, he says the reason for it is because Donald Trump's a big liar, and it's hard to disagree with Bernie Sanders' analysis, which I will not disagree with after I show you that clip here.
Turn to Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. Donald Trump blamed him yesterday for some of the violence at his canceled event in Chicago.
People that were there, that came there, that were invited there, thousands and thousands of people, they caused no problem. They were taunted, they were harassed by these other people. These other people, by the way, some represented Bernie, our communist friend.
And Senator Bernie Sanders joins me now. Senator, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
So Donald Trump said Saturday that some of the people who disrupted his rally in Chicago, quote, represented Bernie, our communist friend. You just heard him say that. And then this morning, he issued something of a warning to you on Twitter. He wrote, Bernie Sanders is lying when he says his disruptors aren't told to go to my events. Be careful, Bernie, or my supporters will go to yours. What's your response, sir?
Well, for a start, you know, Mr. Trump should be, we should take Mr. Trump's words with a grain of salt, because I think, as almost everybody knows, this man cannot stop lying about anything. To call me a communist is a lie. To talk about our organization or our campaign disrupting his meeting is a lie. Were there some people there? There were thousands of people, as I understand it. Some of them were supporters of mine, but certainly, absolutely, we had nothing to do, our campaign had nothing to do with disrupting his meeting. I think what you see, Jake, is a man, and even his Republican colleagues make this point, his language, his intonations, when he talks about carrying people out in stretchers, when you see at his rallies people sucker punch folks, kick people when they're down. This is a man who keeps implying violence, and then you end up getting what you see. So I think that he, in fact, has got to tell his supporters that in the United States of America, you don't go beating up people, that people have a right to peacefully protest, and I hope that becomes the tone of his campaign. But I will also say this. I think Trump is getting nervous because he is seeing in virtually every national poll, last NBC poll, we were 18 points ahead of him. Statewide polls, we are way ahead of him. People in America know that we cannot have a president like Trump who insults Mexicans, who insults women, who insults Muslims, who insults veterans and John McCain. People are catching on to Donald Trump. That's why he's getting reckless.
So I think there's very little to disagree with in terms of Bernie Sanders' analysis of Donald Trump. As I said before, I played the clip, and I'm going to show Bernie Sanders' next response. This is to the Trump charge that Bernie Sanders supporters or people on the left are going to protest at his rallies to shut them down. And this is actually something I'll discuss a little more when I show the Donald Trump clips where he claims his First Amendment rights are being assailed by these protesters on the left. And I mean, there is something of an argument, there's something called the heckler's veto that, you can protest and you can make your opinion known, but if you protest so much that you stop the person in the front from being able to speak, that's a heckler's veto, and that's not protected by the First Amendment. And Bernie Sanders seems to realize that in his answer, also over on CNN State of the Union, talking to Jake Tapper over here.
Group People for Bernie, which I understand is not an official campaign group, but it is a group of your supporters. They were claiming at least partial credit for shutting down the Trump rally, that it wasn't just luck. This is a tweet of theirs. It took organizers from dozens of organizations and thousands of people to pull off. Great work. Now, I get protesting, but the goal here of these protests seemed to be to stop the rally from happening, and I'm wondering if you have any concerns about supporters of yours stopping Donald Trump from exercising his First Amendment right to speak.
Look, Jake, no, I agree. Look, you've just indicated there were many, many, many organizations. We learned about this when we saw it on television. Our campaign had nothing to do about it. I think people have the right to protest. I do not like people disrupting anybody's meetings, and I would hope that my supporters will not disrupt meetings. To protest is one thing, to disrupt is something else. But once again, Trump is not telling the truth. It should not surprise anybody. He very rarely tells the truth when he says that our campaign disrupted his meeting. It was not. We have millions of supporters, and people do things, but it was not our campaign.
But just to be clear, any violence, any disruption that is inappropriate from any of your supporters, you denounce, and you would tell your supporters not to do that?
Absolutely. But I also think, and again, this is not just me talking. This is people in the Republican Party. As I understand it, Jake, Donald Trump's own campaign manager is now up on charges for assaulting a female reporter, bruising her. I mean, this is a campaign whose rhetoric, whose people now, because I think of that rhetoric, are leaning too much in the direction of violence. And Trump himself, I think, is the primary cause of this. He has absolutely got to tone it down.
So that was Bernie Sanders at least understanding that protesters shouldn't go so far as to shut down a rally, that at least that's not protected by the First Amendment. I mean, there is a level of civil disobedience that you can justify if you think, for example, if you see Donald Trump as like the American Hitler and that he's fascist and you want to try to do something to show that you're opposed to his movement, you could engage in civil disobedience and try to shut down his rallies, but that wouldn't be protected by the First Amendment. You would end up getting arrested and taking your punishment as, part of the spotlight you want to put on the injustice of the entire Trump campaign. And there are some really nasty parts of the Trump campaign, and we'll see some of those in just a few minutes when I get to the Trump clips. But I want to show one more Bernie Sanders clip, kind of in the same general area. This is responding directly to Donald Trump's tweet threatening to send Trump supporters to Bernie Sanders rallies. And you'll hear some of the same response from Bernie, but there's enough different that I thought I would include this one last clip. They show the specific tweet. This is also from Jake Tapper on CNN's. Oh, I'm sorry. This is from CBS's Face the Nation talking to John Dickerson this morning over here.
Trump says he might start sending protesters to your rallies.
Well, you know, Donald Trump has been an incredibly divisive figure. Day after day, his rhetoric is inciting violence. We have seen videos of some of his supporters responding to that rhetoric by kicking people, by sucker punching them. You know, we have seen recently charges leveled against his own campaign manager for assaulting a female reporter. So there's a lot of this feelings about violence coming from Trump's campaign, and I very much hope that he understands that in a democracy, people should be allowed to go to anybody's rally, peacefully demonstrate without fear of being beaten up. So I really hope he tones it down. This is not good for the country.
Do you encourage some of your protesters, some of the protesters at the, some of your supporters, I should say, are going to these rallies? Would you encourage them to keep doing that?
No, not to disrupt rallies. And Trump, look, I won't shock you, John, by telling you that Donald Trump lies a whole lot. I mean, he calls me a communist. That's a lie. To suggest that our campaign is telling people to disrupt his campaign is a lie. We don't. And we have millions of supporters, and some of them will do what they do. But our campaign has never, not once, organized any effort to disrupt Mr. Trump's rallies or anybody else's rallies. That's not what we do.
In the contest this week with Hillary Clinton.
So that's the last clip I have of the real Bernie Sanders talking about the threat from Donald Trump. But before I leave the Democratic side of the 2016 presidential campaign, I want to show one more political comedy clip on that topic, and then I'm actually going to start the Republican side with a couple more political comedy clips. This is actually Larry David doing his Bernie Sanders impression on Saturday Night Live last night. This is what they call the cold open. You'll see Beck Bennet is doing a Jake Tapper impression. You just saw Jake Tapper. And it's an interview with Bernie Sanders talking about some of his demographic problems. And I think some of this was actually kind of funny. And I like the Larry David impression of Bernie Sanders. So I will end the topic with that clip, which I will discuss after you watch it here.
Now, Senator, you may have won Michigan, but Hillary still leads you in both delegates and superdelegates.
Can I ask you something? What's a superdelegate? Who calls themselves that? It's so cocky. They walk around like they're such big shots. Ooh, I beg your pardon, Mr. Superdelegate. Let me tell you something. I've met some of these superdelegates. They're not so super. Mediocre delegates is more like it.
But, Senator, many think you need these superdelegates to win the nomination.
Not true. No, not true. I have the voters. My message is resonating with a very diverse group of white people. And I've got supporters of all ages, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds. That's it. The young people love me, Tapper, because I'm like them. I got a lot of big plans and absolutely no idea how to achieve them.
You're still struggling with minorities. Why do you think African Americans aren't voting for you?
Probably because I look like someone who at some point told them, get out of my store.
So what do you think? Is that a good satirical skewering of Bernie Sanders by Larry David and the writers at Saturday Night Live? A couple of those things about how he's got a diverse crowd of white people, and he's got people from 18 years old to 19 years old and whatever. I thought that was kind of funny, and I enjoy the Larry David impression. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. You can also let me know what you think of the real Bernie Sanders clips. I think I showed 9 of them, which seem to be fairly popular with my audience. And now I'm going to show, so the next topic, of course, is the Republican side of the 2016 presidential race. And I'm going to start off with a clip of Bill Maher in his monologue last Friday night, making fun of some of the violence at the Trump rallies. This is, I don't know if I've ever seen Bill Maher show a clip in his monologue, but he starts with a clip of the sucker punch that occurred at one of the rallies, which I won't have to explain because he shows the clip, and then he makes fun of the cops and he makes fun of Donald Trump, as I will discuss after you watch that clip over here.
Say what you want about Donald Trump. He has made sucker punching great again. You saw this yesterday? Oh man, is this ugly? This guy sucker punched this guy. A Trump supporter punched a protester, sucker punched him. And he said, why did he do it? Because he was not acting like an American. And he was deliberately going out of his way to be black. And then the police arrest the black guy. Did you see that? And they charged him with resisting assault? What the fuck? And Trump asked about it, basically excused it. He said his support, this is his quote, he said his supporters have anger that's unbelievable. He said they love this country, they don't like seeing bad trade deals, they don't like to see higher taxes. And naturally, the answer to bad trade deals and higher taxes is punching black people. I think that's obvious. I mean, this stuff doesn't happen at anybody else's rallies, punching and shoving and spitting and kicking. Although at a Sanders rally this week, a man was warned about kvetching. So, not exactly an equivalency, but...
Kvetching. Bill Maher shows his Jewish heritage by ending that series of jokes with a Yiddish word, which that wasn't my favorite part of the joke. I think the other two punchlines in that set were funnier than the last one, but I thought I would show the whole set on making fun of Donald Trump and the cops, especially the cops who arrested him for resisting assault. That was my favorite part. But you can let me know what was your favorite part of that joke down in the comment section. I'm actually going to move on to Michael Che on Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update, making fun of Donald Trump, the violence at Donald Trump's rallies, and then this one woman who was photographed giving a Nazi salute, as I will discuss after you watch that clip from Saturday Night Live last night over here.
Donald Trump had to cancel a rally in Chicago last night over security concerns. Believe it or not, the most racially divisive candidate showed up to the most violent city in the country, and things did not go smoothly. Who'd have thought that when these people tried to have a reasonable and productive conversation with this lady, somehow they couldn't find common ground? What did they think was going to happen? She was going to lower her Nazi salute to say, hey, you make a good point, Kareem. Also, can we just talk about how adorable this little old racist lady is? She shouldn't be at a rally. She should be at home teaching her parrot the N-word. And where have I seen her before? She looks... Oh, there she is.
I like the way Michael Che refers to the Nazi salute lady as cute and gives that little cute emoji to refer to her. And oh, speaking of cute, for those of you who are interested in my dog Sandy, I saw some comments in the comment section about that. I just posted a picture of what Sandy's doing right now over on my Twitter and my Facebook. It's facebook.com/liberalviewer and twitter.com/liberalviewer. So if you want to see what Sandy's doing right now, you can check those out. I now actually want to move on from the political comedy and the cuteness to real coverage of this serious uptick in violence at Donald Trump's campaigns. And the first clip I'm going to show is from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. George Stephanopoulos introduced a report from Jonathan Karl that covered pretty much everything that happened. This is, I think, the most extensive of the reports I'm going to show, though I'm going to show a few different ones from the different corporate media outlets. Like I said, this is the ABC one. It's about 4 minutes long here.
This week after the ugliest 2 days of a dangerously angry White House race. Chicago Friday night, a Trump rally canceled after protesters clashed with Trump supporters. Dayton Saturday afternoon. Trump startled when a protester storms the stage. Look at the Secret Service circle round him fast. And overnight in Kansas City, police used pepper spray outside a Trump rally, arrest 4. It's all after a week where a Trump supporter was arrested for cold cocking a protester. ABC's John Karl starts us off.
At Thursday's presidential debate in Florida, the Republican candidates were on their best behavior.
I cannot believe how civil it's been up here.
Just 24 hours later, the campaign entered an ugly and dangerous new phase. Protesters clashing with Trump supporters in Chicago, forcing the cancellation of a rally Friday night. And on the campaign trail Saturday, this frightening scene. As a protester attempted to charge at Donald Trump.
I was ready for him, but it's much easier if the cops do it.
Protests at Trump rallies are so commonplace, they've become as much a part of the show as his promise to build a wall.
You know what they used to do to guys like that when they were in a place like this? They'd be carried out on a stretcher, folks. Like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you.
Knock the crap out of him, would you? Seriously. I will pay for the legal fees, I promise.
In North Carolina this week, the world saw a Trump supporter do exactly what Donald Trump had called for, sucker punching a protester as he was being escorted out. Now Trump's rivals are openly accusing him of sowing the seeds of chaos and fomenting violence.
The job of a true leader is not to stoke people's anger.
Donald Trump has created a toxic environment.
Encouraging violence is wrong, and that's why I've called it out.
President Obama weighed in too.
Those who aspire to be our leaders should be trying to bring us together and not turning us against one another.
Trump sure isn't backing down, blaming the chaos on professional rabble-rousers and supporters of Bernie Sanders.
We just turned this to a burning rally. We want to get along with everybody, but when they have organized, professionally staged wise guys, we've got to fight back.
But as the campaign has taken its ugly turn, Trump's opponents are now wavering on their promise to support him if he wins the nomination.
But do you support him as the nominee if he's the nominee?
I don't know. It's getting harder every day.
And John Karl joins us now. Boy, John, you saw Senator Marco Rubio there look pretty shaken up yesterday when he was talking about this, and I think all of us are a bit taken aback. We haven't seen this kind of violence on the campaign trail since 1968.
It's hard to look at what is happening now and not think of those images from Chicago in 1968, when you had violent clashes on the streets, and you had disruptions right on the floor of the Democratic convention. Now, George, I have been to Trump rallies all over the country, and it is important to say that the overwhelming majority of Trump supporters are entirely peaceful. The overwhelming majority of the protesters are entirely peaceful. But I have never seen a situation where you have the candidate himself from the podium encouraging, even condoning violence. As these protests grow bigger, grow more fervent, I fear that this could actually get worse.
And what we don't know yet, John, is what impact this is going to have on the voting, those big states coming up on Tuesday.
It's hard to say. Thousands of people have already voted in Florida and Ohio because of early voting. In the short run, this may actually help Trump as you have kind of a reaction against the protesters. But in all the contests, and nearly half the country has voted so far, Trump has not gained a majority of Republicans. If he wants to win, he needs to unify Republicans. And of course, ultimately, he's going to have to go a long way towards unifying the country. That's not the direction this is going.
Okay, John.
And the saddest part about that analysis from John Karl on ABC's This Week, I think, is where he said that in the short term, the violence and the Trump reaction to the violence at his rallies is going to help him amongst the Republican electorate. He's painted himself as the victim here. And, you know, the thing is, I didn't have time to search out this clip, but there was this one clip of an early Trump reaction to what happened where he was actually almost sympathetic with the left-wing protesters, saying, you know, that they had economic anxiety and, you know, that we have to come together. And he started reacting that way. I think it was on Fox and Friends, the very first reaction to the shutdown of the Chicago rally. But then after that, he totally switched around and started attacking the protesters as coming from Bernie Sanders and coming from MoveOn.org and being professionals. And you'll see some more of that in a minute. But I think Donald Trump decided that he would get some mileage in the Republican primary out of claiming to be a victim and attacking the protesters. And it's still too early the way things are shaping up for, you know, he still hasn't wrapped up the Republican primary, so he can't pivot towards bringing us all together, even though he may eventually do that once he does wrap it up, I think. But I'll discuss that more when I show the Donald Trump clips. I want to show a couple more of the news stories. The next one is only about a minute long. It's from CNN State of the Union. Jake Tapper, he always starts the show with what's the State of the Union. Of course, this week it's chaotic, and then he gives his little roundup of some scenes from Trump rallies. Keep an eye out for some of the people who seem to be getting injured, because you'll hear Donald Trump claim that no one ever gets injured at his rallies. And I think already in that Jonathan Karl piece, you saw some people who look kind of injured. So look at the footage for injuries, because there are definitely people who are getting injured in some of these incidents in the chaotic Trump situation that Jake Tapper discusses over in this clip.
For President Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, but first, let's talk about the state of our union, which is chaotic. Dozens arrested at Donald Trump's rallies this weekend as the frontrunner's supporters and protesters face off, sometimes leading to violent confrontations. Friday's rally in Chicago was canceled after a melee broke out, leaving 2 police officers injured. Trump continued campaigning, but was often interrupted by protesters whom he taunted from the stage.
I don't want to ruin people's lives, but the only way we're going to stop this craziness is if we press charges, because then their lives are going to be ruined. They're going to know their lives are going to be ruined.
And in Ohio, Secret Service rushed to surround Trump after a man jumped a barrier in an attempt to get on stage with Trump. He was arrested as well. Trump's fellow candidates in both parties condemning the violence and accusing the Republican frontrunner of creating a toxic environment. But with just 2 days until Tuesday's winner-take-all primaries in Ohio and Florida, Trump still looks on track to maintain his significant delegate lead. And joining us now, Donald Trump, Mr.
And I will get to the Donald Trump clips in a while. Actually, I'm going to show Cruz, Rubio, and Kasich clips before I get to the Donald Trump clips at the end. But I have a couple other news stories or news reports on the Republican race before I get to the interviews of the candidates. In this next one, you'll see Chuck Todd over on NBC's Meet the Press puts it in the context of the 1968 Chicago violence for the Democratic convention there. And then you'll see he talks about how everyone is reacting negatively to Trump other than Bernie Sanders. For some reason, he never mentions Bernie Sanders in this clip. And this is sort of another little overview of the violence. You heard about some police injuries in that last clip, and I think you may see some video of some injuries in this Chuck Todd report just a little over a minute again over here.
Know how familiar Chicago is with violence at political events. In 1968, anti-Vietnam War protesters famously clashed with police during the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. And even though what played out ultimately became known as a police riot, the chaos tarnished the Democratic Party and helped lead to Hubert Humphrey's defeat and loss to Richard Nixon later that fall. Fast forward to Friday night in Chicago, as pushing, shoving, and fighting led to Donald Trump canceling scheduled appearance. Trump's Republican opponents, Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio and John Kasich, agreed the ugly scene was the result of a toxic environment nurtured and encouraged by Trump. And here's Hillary Clinton adding her perspective yesterday.
If you play with matches, you can start a fire you can't control. That is not leadership, that is political arson.
But to his supporters, it was another example of opponents trying to deny the leading candidate for the Republican nomination his right to free speech. And all of this comes just days ahead of what we're calling Separation Tuesday. 5 primaries that may finally...
Yeah, Chuck Todd's the only one calling it Separation Tuesday, as he admitted in a panel discussion a little later that I didn't take a clip from. But you notice how he showed everyone's reaction except for Bernie Sanders to Donald Trump's violence and violent rhetoric. He talked about Kasich, Cruz, Rubio, Hillary Clinton. I don't know why Bernie Sanders didn't end up in there. You think that's a little bit of NBC bias against Bernie Sanders? I don't know. It's probably just an oversight, but some people like to find malice in just negligence. You can let me know what you think down in the comments section. The next report on the violence at the Trump rallies I want to show is kind of a different perspective from the last two. This is from a CBS reporter. I think his name is Sopan. Do I have that right? Sopan Deb, and he was actually arrested at or outside the Chicago rally that got canceled by Donald Trump, and he has some good footage. You'll also see injuries, definite injuries. Remember, I said look for injuries because I'll show a few different clips of Donald Trump claiming that no one ever gets injured at his rallies. But that's just one small aspect of this kind of nasty story that doesn't reflect well on the police, I don't think, as I will discuss after you watch that CBS Face the Nation clip over here.
Friday night at the Chicago Trump event was CBS News reporter Sopan Deb, who covers Donald Trump for the network. He spoke to CBS News producer Charlie Brooks yesterday.
It was tense right from the start. There were protesters, hundreds of them, that took over multiple sections of the arena here last night. And there were mini scuffles that broke out before the rally was supposed to start, but nothing, too serious at that point. And there were probably thousands of protesters outside. Eventually, there was an announcement made over the loudspeaker that said that Donald Trump was, concerned about security and was postponing the rally. At which point, there was total pandemonium inside the arena. Lots of cursing, lots of people pushing and shoving, on both sides, both Trump supporters and Trump protesters. Eventually, I went outside, and I saw a group of police officers running towards an area of protesters. So I had my camera, and I jet along with them to this area. And I get to this crowd, and there's a man being arrested. His head is bloodied on the ground. And so I'm shooting this, and the protesters at this point had shut down the street. And the police officers are saying, we need to clear the street. And another scuffle breaks out, and I'm shooting this scuffle. And before I knew it, a police officer, at least one police officer, maybe multiple, pulled me down from the back of my hoodie and threw me to the ground and bashed my face into the street. And then this police officer put his boot to my neck and cuffed me. I am continuously identifying myself as press. I said, I have credentials, I can show you, I have credentials, but they're not listening to me. Eventually, they put me into the back of this police van, along with the man that was bloodied and another gentleman. And we're in the pitch black, and then I was in essence handcuffed for, maybe an hour before the police van took me to the station, processed me, they cuffed me again at the station, and where the police officers told me I was being charged with resisting arrest.
You've been covering this campaign for a while. Have you seen tensions build? How would you characterize the mood in these events over the last couple of weeks or even a month?
There have been protests going on at Donald Trump rallies for months and months and months. This is nothing new. However, there's definitely been a recent uptick. I have certainly never seen anything like last night. That was unprecedented. There have been other groups of coordinated protests at past rallies, but nothing as massive as what I saw last night.
Do you have any impressions of the sort of people that were making up the bulk of the protesters?
Well, according to a student I talked to last night, that was one of the organizers of the protests, he told me there were countless student groups there and that this was a coordinated effort going back weeks as soon as they heard that Donald Trump was coming here. Yeah. The person I talked to last night said he couldn't tell me how many student groups were involved because there were so many. So it's unclear how many groups were protesting, but there were certainly a whole bunch of different chants going on, including Black Lives Matter, vulgar chants in multiple different languages. It was certainly a diverse group of protesters, but I will say most of them were young.
So at least Trump is promoting diversity in terms of the protesters that he draws, I guess, according to that really interesting report I thought from the guy from CBS, was Sopan Deb, and it also gives you a look at the way the police are treating the protesters, and apparently not just the protesters, but I don't know if it's because Sopan Deb there has skin that isn't exactly white, if that's why he ended up with his face crushed against the concrete, or if it's because he didn't clear the area when he was told to clear the area, or what the facts are behind that. But it turns out that from his reporting, there are people being injured by the police, at least at these Trump rallies and the protests around it. Before I move on to the candidate clips, those are the last news overviews of the violence at the Trump rallies. I am going to show two really quick clips of the polls of some of the upcoming mini Super Tuesday states. This is the mirror of what I showed over on the Democratic side. It's the CBS Battleground Tracker polls and then the NBC Wall Street Journal Marist polls. Both of them cover, I think, Florida, Ohio, and Illinois. And Trump is basically winning in all of them except Ohio, where Kasich is winning or is tied, or it depends on the poll. And after, either in between or after I show you the two poll clips, I will remind you of my caveat about polls. Let me make sure I get the, starting off with clip 22. This is the CBS Battleground Tracker poll here.
5 states hold primaries Tuesday, and we have new CBS Battleground Tracker numbers in 3 of them. Among Republicans in Florida, home state Senator Marco Rubio is running third at 21%, behind Donald Trump, who is at the top with 44%, and Ted Cruz, who is in second with 24%. John Kasich is far behind with 9% support, but in his home state of Ohio, John Kasich is tied with Donald Trump at 33%. Ted Cruz is behind them at 27%. Marco Rubio is far down at 5%. In Illinois, Donald Trump on top at 38%, with Ted Cruz right behind him at 34%. John Kasich comes in at 16% and Marco Rubio at 11%. But the big story this weekend...
So, yeah, those are the CBS polls, and and you saw that in Ohio, in those polls, John Kasich and Donald Trump are tied. In the NBC polls I'm about to show you, John Kasich is actually ahead of Donald Trump. But like I said, when I showed the polls on the Democratic side, I think they're kind of like long-term weather forecasts for like the 5 or 10-day weather forecast, where the information you get can be useful in trying to plan what may happen, but you can also be pretty sure that what is forecast is not exactly what's going to happen. And then there's also a significant chance that what happens will be very, very different from what's forecast. And as an example, is Bernie Sanders winning Michigan this last week, when the Real Clear Politics poll had him 21 points behind. But with that in mind, I will move on to the NBC Wall Street Journal Marist poll for I believe it's for the exact same 3 states you just saw: Florida, Ohio, and Florida, Ohio, and Illinois over here.
Start with the Republicans. In Florida, an absolute must-win for Marco Rubio, while Rubio trails Donald Trump by a nearly 2-to-1 margin, 43-22. Ted Cruz at 21%, right behind Rubio. In Illinois, Trump's lead is smaller, but it's significant over Cruz and Kasich. He's got a 9-point lead over Cruz, but Kasich a close third there to Cruz. But in Ohio, it is Governor John Kasich holding a slim 6-point lead over Donald Trump, 39-33. Obviously, a Kasich win there would keep him in the race and complicate Trump's efforts to win a majority of the delegates before the convention. On the Democratic side, it's Hillary Clinton.
I already showed you the Democratic side over in the earlier topic, but you can see that set of polls is the only one that has anyone beating Donald Trump anywhere, and it's John Kasich beating Donald Trump in his home state. John Kasich is currently in 4th place in delegates. So John Kasich winning Ohio is basically a vote for a contested convention. And as to what the exact delegate counts are, I'm actually going to show you Chuck Todd giving the exact delegate count in his introduction to his interview with Senator Ted Cruz, and then asking him about, how he's going to get the delegates. And you can see, or actually, no, this is actually not asking about the delegates. It's asking him about his reaction to the violence at Donald Trump's rallies. And as you saw in the introductory pieces, all of Donald Trump's rivals have in one way or another denounced his inciting rhetoric, while at the same time not siding with the protesters, saying that they're doing things that are wrong as well. And you'll hear Ted Cruz give that answer after Chuck Todd gives the introductory delegate count I promised over here.
Full of contests yesterday that didn't get much attention. Marco Rubio won the Republican caucus in Washington, D.C. by 1 point over John Kasich. Ted Cruz took the GOP caucus in Guam. Yes, Guam. Every delegate matters. None of this changes the delegate math per se. Donald Trump now leads, though, Ted Cruz by 84 votes. Yesterday, I was joined by Senator Ted Cruz of Texas And we started by talking about Trump. Let me start with the tone of the campaign, and you have addressed this a couple of times in specifically having to do with Donald Trump's rallies. Let me play two different explanations you've given to this, one from the debate and one from Friday. Here it is.
We've seen for 7 years a president who believes he's above the law, who behaves like an emperor. And when you have a campaign that disrespects the voters, when you have a campaign that affirmatively encourages violence, you create an environment that only encourages this sort of nasty discord.
Is Donald Trump the one that's responsible for the tone of his rallies, and Donald Trump alone?
Well, let's be clear. Listen, the protesters have no right to engage in violence. They have no right to threaten violence. And these protesters, whether it's Black Lives Matter or Bernie Sanders protesters, who are coming in just trying to shout down any speaker, that's not free speech. The First Amendment gives you a right to speak, but it doesn't give you a right to silence others. And so the protesters are behaving abusively and wrong. But at the end of the day, in any campaign, responsibility starts at the top. And it is not beneficial when you have a presidential candidate like Donald Trump telling his supporters, punch that guy in the face.
What would you advise Donald Trump to do? Because this is reflecting on the Republican Party as a whole, or it could, considering he's currently the frontrunner.
Listen, I think every candidate ought to aspire towards civility, towards decency, towards bringing us together. I don't think we should be using angry and hateful rhetoric. I don't think we should be cursing at people. And I'll tell you, listen, I've been troubled. I mentioned at the debate this week, I'm troubled by the rallies that Donald holds, where he asks all the people there to raise their hand and pledge their support to him. This is America. We don't pledge allegiance to a man. We pledge allegiance to a flag. Right. We pledge our support for the Constitution. But that is something that you see kings and queens doing of their subjects, and all of this is part and parcel of the same thing. We need a president who understands he works for the people. Listen, I am running to pledge my support to you, not the other way around. And I hope that all of the candidates reflect that understanding.
I want you to react to something.
It's a sad, sad day when Senator Ted Cruz is the voice of reason in the Republican primary for president, but I guess compared to Donald Trump and his, like, hand-raising pledge well, that actually is a somewhat disingenuous attack, because Donald Trump, when he's having them raise their hand in the pledge, they're pledging to vote for him. You know, he's basically trying to make sure that people promise to turn out to vote. He's not making them pledge to Donald Trump, but I like the way Ted Cruz has come up with this sort of nuanced way to attack Donald Trump for the Sig Heil hand-raising at his rallies without actually saying it in a way that says what's really happening or what people are really attacking him for. But before I leave Ted Cruz and move over to John Kasich and Marco Rubio and then several Donald Trump clips, I want to show Ted Cruz not being so reasonable when Chuck Todd points out that his position on Donald Trump isn't really that far from what President Barack Obama recently said about Donald Trump and the problems that the Republicans are having with Trump. And you'll see here that Ted Cruz can't accept that he's on the same side as Barack Obama and like totally pivots to say it's Trump and Obama who are the demagogues, and he's like the voice of reason. But it's at this point he doesn't sound so reasonable. At least I don't think so, as I will explain after you watch that final Ted Cruz clip for the broadcast over here.
Something here that President Obama said at a fundraiser, responding to the tone of Donald Trump rallies. Here it is, sir.
And what's been happening in our politics lately, it's not an accident. For years we've been told we should be angry about America, and that the economy is a disaster, and that we're weak, and that compromise is weakness, and that you can ignore science, and you can ignore facts, and say whatever you want about the president, and feed suspicion about immigrants, and Muslims, and poor people, and people who aren't like us.
That's the president essentially saying this has been happening for years, for most of his term.
You know, Chuck, Barack Obama is a world-class demagogue. That language there is designed to divide us. No, Mr. President, we're not angry at that. We're angry at politicians in Washington, including you, who ignore the men and women who elected you, who have been presiding over our jobs going overseas for 7 years, who have been cutting deals that are enriching the rich and powerful, the special interests and the big corporations, while working men and women are seeing their wages stagnating. And he talks about immigrants and Muslims. Mr. President, we're mad at a president who wants to bring in Syrian refugees who may be infiltrated by ISIS, and you're unwilling to be commander-in-chief and keep us safe. So don't engage in attacking the people like the president did. I'll tell you, that language is the kind of self-righteous moralizing from the president that makes people angry.
You think that's worse than what Donald Trump?
You think
that's worse than what Donald Trump's been doing?
To be honest, I think it's very much the same. They're both engaging in demagoguery. We need instead a president who wakes up every day working for the hardworking taxpayers. If I'm president, Chuck, my focus is going to be the hardworking taxpayers, bringing back jobs and economic growth. We're going to do that by repealing Obamacare, by passing a simple flat tax, by abolishing the IRS, by pulling back the regulations that are killing small businesses.
Let me talk about your path to the nomination.
And I'm not going to do the path to the nomination clip. Those are the two Ted Cruz clips I want to show. And now I'm going to move on to two Governor John Kasich clips. I think you're going to hear more about Ohio Governor John Kasich this week. If he wins Ohio, I showed the two polls. One shows he's winning, one shows he's tied. And this could be his big moment in the sun. But he really doesn't have much of a chance. At least he doesn't have any chance to get to the convention with the 1,237 delegates necessary to win on the first ballot. But I want to start off with Fox News Sunday's interview of John Kasich. The introduction is Chris Wallace pointing out that John Kasich has to win Ohio, and one of the polls I showed, like I said, shows he's tied, so he could be out of the race on Wednesday, but most likely he will win Ohio. And here's his response, not to whether he has to win Ohio, but his response to the violence at the Donald Trump rallies, which seems to be the big topic on the Sunday morning news analysis shows this Sunday, and why he thinks that Donald Trump is bad for the Republican Party. And anyway, I'll discuss all of that a little more after you watch that clip, starting off with, I think it's a wide photo. I think it's Cleveland, someplace in Ohio. I think it's Cleveland over in this clip.
The Beltway at Cleveland, Ohio. Tuesday is make or break for Ohio Governor John Kasich as he runs close in the polls with Donald Trump. Kasich has made it clear if he loses his home state, he'll drop out of the presidential race. He joins me now from Cleveland. And Governor, welcome back.
Thanks, Chris.
I want to start with the growing violence at the Trump rallies. You say that he has sowed seeds of division, and we're now seeing the fruits of that. You've called it a toxic environment. What does all of this say about the kind of president Donald Trump would be?
Well, he's not going to be president. He's not going to have enough. I'm going to win here in Ohio with the support of the folks here who have seen their lives improve. More jobs, better wages, more hope, more people who have been ignored, who are getting attention. And that's going to be the end of it. He's not going to get to be the president of the United States. And,
what about these rallies and his tenor at these rallies, sir?
I just have to tell you, you can walk into a room, Chris, or an arena or wherever, and you can prey on the fears of people, or you can go in and give them hope. I go into my events and I try to give them hope. And when he goes and pits one group against another and says the reason this isn't good is because of that group, that's not helpful. And I think he has created a toxic environment. That doesn't mean that there aren't some people who have attended his rallies who are intent on causing trouble. But it's a mess, and hopefully it'll settle down, and we can move beyond this. The last debate was far more civil than the ones before. And maybe they're catching on to the fact that being positive may be the best way to run a campaign for president. For me, I'm not going to take the low road to the highest office in the land. And we're growing. We're doing well in Ohio. We're doing well in other states. We're going to be very competitive. And Chris, don't be surprised if I go with the strongest amount of delegates into the convention.
All right, let's talk about your path.
And that's one of John Kasich's talking points that you'll hear in the next clip also, that he somehow thinks he's going to go into the convention with the largest number of delegates, because that's the most he can promise at this point. There's no way he can promise to go into the convention with 1,237 delegates, because as you'll see in this next question from Chuck Todd over on Meet the Press, the premise of the question is it's basically mathematically impossible for John Kasich to get to the magic number of 1,237. Later in the panel discussion, in the clip I don't show, they actually show what percentage of the remaining delegates each candidate has to get, and the percentage for John Kasich is, I think, 112%. So he has to get more delegates than there are delegates to go into the convention with enough delegates to win on the first ballot. But you'll see here, talking to Chuck Todd over on Meet the Press, he doesn't say that he's going to get the majority, but he says he's going to get the most delegates, and he talks about how he thinks he's going to win, which doesn't seem very plausible, but I guess it could happen. You can tell me what you think after you watch that clip over here.
He's not going to be the nominee, Chuck. I have to tell you, it's not going to happen.
Well, by the way, how does it happen for you? We've done the math. You will go on to win Ohio. You need 112% of the remaining delegates to get to the magic number. Now, I wasn't a math major, but that's mathematically impossible. So how do you get this? Obviously, it has to be a contested convention, right?
Well, look, there's 1,000 delegates yet to pick, is my understanding. And don't be surprised if I go to the convention with the largest number of delegates. Is it likely that we'll have to have some sort of a multi-ballot convention? Yeah, it's probably likely. But you know what? You never know in politics, Chuck. You know that. What's true today is not necessarily true tomorrow. All I'm doing is telling people I've helped to create over 400,000 jobs in Ohio. We're running surpluses. Wages are going up faster than the national average. I did it in Washington, and I want to go back and do it one more time. That's what I want to do, and that's what I'm focused on.
Now, obviously, this whole thing, contested convention, not only hinges on you doing well in Ohio, it may hinge on Rubio doing well in Florida. Here's what Marco Rubio said about you yesterday.
Clearly, John Kasich has a better chance of winning Ohio than I do, and if a voter in Ohio concludes that voting for John Kasich gives us the best chance to stop Donald Trump there, I anticipate that's what they'll do.
And as you know, his campaign went on to say that they're encouraging their supporters to do that in Ohio. Why aren't you reciprocating and asking your supporters in Florida to do the same thing for Marco Rubio?
Well, Chuck, first of all, my voters are not like robots where I can say, go do something, okay? How do you run for office and tell people to vote for somebody else? But let's be clear, I'm not in Florida. In fact, I tried to call Marco last night to wish him good luck. I couldn't get him, but look, I'm doing the best I can.
You want Marco Rubio to win Florida?
I'd like to win Florida. I don't see that it's in the cards like it is I'm going to win Ohio, okay?
Fair enough.
But look, the bottom line is I don't go telling people what they should do, particularly when they're for me. You know, go support somebody else. If that was the case, that doesn't make sense to me, okay?
Fair enough.
So I heard Governor John Kasich of Ohio give that same answer on a few different interviews. I only took a couple clips of him, and I cut out, like, he was on 3 different stations and gave very duplicative answers. Those are the 2 John Kasich clips I thought were worth showing to you. And I thought it was interesting that he said there, and he said on another show also, that he tried to call Marco Rubio to wish him luck. Like, it sounded almost like he was going to try to work out some sort of, quid pro quo where Marco Rubio says vote for John Kasich in Ohio even if you support Rubio, and John Kasich says vote for Marco Rubio in Florida even if you support John Kasich, but he couldn't get a hold of him, so he's not going to make the pronouncement on air without having worked out the deal with Marco Rubio beforehand. But I don't know. But he also said that his supporters aren't robots and you can't really tell them who to vote for, but I don't know. And in a clip I didn't show, John Kasich said that he wasn't aware of any Stop Trump campaign where the candidates were coordinating to throw their support to each other in states where they couldn't win. But you heard Marco Rubio in the question there to John Kasich actually say that his supporters in Ohio should vote for John Kasich. And now I'm going to move on to 3 clips from Marco Rubio. In this first clip, I believe it's also from NBC's Meet the Press. I'm sorry. The first clip is actually from CNN State of the Union, Jake Tapper. And this is Marco Rubio reacting to the violence at the Trump rallies. And just like Ted Cruz and John Kasich, he doesn't side with the protesters, but he does have criticism for Donald Trump and his rhetoric over, let me make sure I get the right clip. Like I said, this is from CNN State of the Union this morning here.
On his response to Trump shortly. But first, let's turn to Senator Marco Rubio. He is crisscrossing his home state of Florida, sounding not just upset about Trump and the violence at some of Trump's rallies, but almost in despair. And joining us now from Orlando, Florida, Senator Marco Rubio. Senator, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning.
This weekend, you condemned Donald Trump for allegedly inciting his supporters to commit violence. You called it a, quote, frightening, grotesque, and disturbing development in American politics. Frightening. What are you frightened about?
That we can no longer have a debate in this country about policy differences without it resorting to the highest level of anxiety, anger. You see images of Americans now literally at each other's throats, pointing fingers at each other's face. Look, some of these protesters that you saw in Chicago obviously were organized, maybe even paid to disrupt an event, so I'm not excusing their behavior. But this is not just the protesters in Chicago. This is now multiple rallies where people are assaulted and beat up, where a guy gets sucker punched by one of the Trump supporters, and then instead of condemning it, Trump is silent. When the guy is released from jail, he says the next time maybe we should kill the protester. Again, there's silence. Then he goes on stage and makes things up. He keeps telling the story about a general who dipped bullets into pig blood and shot a bunch of prisoners, of Muslim prisoners. Not only is it outrageous, it's a lie. And then he claims that the guy that stormed the stage was in links to ISIS. I mean, he has turned the most important election in a generation into a circus, into a complete fiasco and a carnival. And this country deserves better. I mean, at some point, people have to wake up here. This is really going to do damage to America.
I want to read a tweet that Donald Trump just sent out. He wrote, quote, Bernie Sanders is lying when he says his disruptors aren't told to go to my events. Be careful, Bernie, or my supporters will go to yours. Your response, sir?
I don't know anything about Bernie Sanders' campaign and who they're sending what, but this is not just Bernie Sanders. Yeah, a few people had Bernie Sanders signs. Okay, I don't agree with them going and thinking they can shut down a rally. This is something the left has now been doing on college campuses. But he wants to deflect and distract. Here's the bottom line. He has said to people, why don't we basically beat up the protesters and beat up the hecklers and I'll pay your legal bills. And here's what people have to understand. Maybe you think it's a joke, but there are people out there that are not balanced. There are people out there that are not completely in control of themselves. And they hear something like this from a leader, you don't know what they're going to do next. And when someone is seeking a position of leadership and is already in a position of influence, you speak responsibly. This notion that a president can just say anything they want, or even a presidential candidate can say anything they want, whatever comes to mind, it's just not true, and it's reckless, and it's dangerous. And I hope people wake up on time and realize what's happening here, because if we reach a point in this country where we can't have a debate about politics without it getting to levels of violence and anger where people think that just because you're angry, you can say and almost do anything you want, we're going to lose our republic. We're going to have a big problem. Those images from Chicago the other night, it looks like something out of the third world.
And you heard Marco Rubio use the term third world there, and you'll hear Jake Tapper a little later in the interview also use the word third world. I used the word, or the words, third world, the term third world in a broadcast last week, the week before, and I got a lot of negative feedback from people that there was something, I don't know if it was exactly racist, but at least backward about saying third world. You should say developing world. But I don't know, I grew up and learned history way back in like the 80s and the 90s when we had, the capitalist side of the U.S.-Soviet conflict was the first world, and the Soviets and the other communist countries, the Soviets and the Chinese and the non-aligned communists like Yugoslavia, they were the second world. And then there was the third, fourth, and I think fifth world. I think there was a third, fourth, and fifth world, depending on how poorly developed the countries were. Back when I learned the first through fifth world, but I guess we call it the developing world, or that's the more politically correct term. But you can see there Marco Rubio, he's not politically correct, he's just correct if you watch the last Republican debate. But in a minute I'm going to show Jake Tapper use that same term. But first I want to show a clip of Marco Rubio making a point, a Robo-Rubio talking point I saw him make at least in one other interview that I didn't take a clip from. And, let me know if you're watching this either live or as a recorded show. Would you like it if I started showing the duplicative clips? Like I showed the candidate saying almost the exact same thing on the ABC show and then the CBS show. I just lined them up and you could watch them be totally robotic, because it's not just Marco Rubio. Almost all the candidates do that same thing where, even in the 9 Bernie Sanders clips I showed, you could see, at least in a couple of those clips, he said almost the exact same thing. It was slightly different based on the question at least. But anyway, I want to move on to this next Marco Rubio clip where he starts off talking about the trolls in the comment sections in the blogs, or getting as nasty as the comment section in the blogs, where presidential candidates have become Twitter trolls. And I thought, I've heard people complaining, especially during the live show, I have a lot of trolls in there commenting, and I don't censor that or block people at all. So I guess that kind of promotes it. But here's Marco Rubio talking about how Donald Trump is turning the presidential campaign into a troll debate. And then he gets a follow-up question from Jake Tapper about whether he's worried that someone's actually going to die at one of these Trump rallies. And unfortunately, I don't think that's too much of a hyperbolic question. And I'll discuss Marco Rubio's answer after I show you that clip. Let me make sure I get the right clip here. Clip number 29. And
point, right? And you look at it and say enough is enough. So I think at the end of the day, we should all examine our behavior moving over the last year on this issue. We should all examine whether we've been quick enough. And that includes the media. That includes your network that has given and not just you, I'm not picking on you, everybody else gives every one of Trump's speeches wall-to-wall coverage, because while they may act outraged by what he says, they cover it and they want to get it live so they can talk about it, and it drives ratings. So I think we all need to take a step back and say, have we contributed to this culture that has turned American politics and the American political discourse into the equivalent of the comment sections in these blogs, where presidential candidates are now basically Twitter trolls?
Would I be overstating matters if I said you sound like you're actually concerned that somebody, before this is all over, somebody might lose their life?
I'm very concerned about that. I'm very concerned. We don't know what's going to happen next here. I know that we've reached a point now where people in American politics have decided that if they don't agree with you, that they can get angry at you, that you're a bad and evil person, that they can say anything they want about you. I think that all the gates of civility have been blown apart, and we've now reached the point where on both sides, everyone is just saying or doing whatever they want. And you can't just say or do whatever you want. This is not about political correctness. This is about rules of civility and the way a society talks to each other. And let me ask everybody this. Do we really want to live in a country where everybody hates each other, where everybody's at each other's throat, where because we disagree on the role of government or the tax rate or Obamacare or foreign policy, we now in this nation cannot have a discourse or agree on any other issue and end up hating each other? Because that's what it feels like. It feels like we're reaching a point now where in America, everyone hates each other. I'm so tired of arguing and fighting with other Americans. Yes, we have serious disagreements, and let's debate those through our republic. But we've reached a point now where if I don't agree with you on something, it's not just that you're wrong, but you're a bad person, you're an evil person, you deserve nothing. I mean, all the rules that once governed our discourse have been blown away, and we're headed in a very dangerous direction. And yes, there are people out there that are unbalanced. There are people out there that do not have control of themselves. We don't know what they will do. And this applies to both sides of this debate, by the way.
And I was talking about Senator Ted Cruz being the voice of reason, and that being a weird situation, and there Senator Marco Rubio is sounding pretty reasonable in his criticisms of Donald Trump and his rhetoric and his incitement to violence. And before I get to all the Donald Trump clips I'm going to show you, I want to show one more Senator Marco Rubio clip. This is again from CNN State of the Union. Even though he did some other interviews, he was pretty robotic and repeating the same points over and over again. So I just took 3 clips from the State of the Union interview. And in this last one, you'll see that this is the one I promised you where Jake Tapper also uses the term third world, that term I got some criticism for using, was it last week before? I know some of my viewers were saying that it was a backwards term. Well, here's Jake Tapper using the term third world to ask Marco Rubio about a New York Times article that quotes him as saying that Donald Trump is like a third world dictator, or that's what Jake Tapper says. And Marco Rubio says, no, I didn't say dictator, I said strong man, which you can tell me if you see any distinction between those terms, which I don't really see any distinction. But before you judge it, you can see Marco Rubio make his attempt at a distinction over in this clip.
You compared Donald Trump to a third world dictator yesterday in an interview with the New York Times. How so?
Well, I don't know about a dictator. I said a third world strongman. You know, he's running for president, so no matter what, he won't be a dictator unless our republic completely crumbles, which I don't anticipate it will. But yeah, here's what happens in many countries around the world. You have a leader that emerges and basically says, don't put your faith in yourselves, don't put your faith in society, put your faith in me. I'm a strong leader, and I'm going to make things better all by myself. This is very typical. You see it in the third world. You see it a lot in Latin America for decades. It's basically the argument he's making that he single-handedly is going to turn the country around. We've never been that kind of country. We have a president. The president is an American citizen who serves for a period of time, constrained by the constitutions and the powers vested in that office. The president works for the people, not the people for the president. And if you listen to the way he describes himself and what he's going to do, he's going to single-handedly do this and do that without regard for whether it's legal or not. Look, I think people are going to have to make up their mind. I can tell you this, no matter what happens in this election, for years to come, there are many people on the right, in the media, and voters at large that are going to be having to explain and justify how they fell into this trap of supporting Donald Trump, because this is not going to end well one way or the other. He's going to be the nominee and he's going to lose. Or he'll have thrown this party into its most chaotic and divisive period ever, and that's unfortunate because the Republican Party is the home of the limited government free enterprise movement in America. And if it crumbles or it divides or it splits apart, it'll be very difficult to elect candidates that hold those views at any level of government until we can bring the party back together.
Senator, should we assume...
So again, Senator Marco Rubio sounding pretty reasonable, except maybe for some of the nice things he said about the Republican Party. But actually, I had hoped that Donald Trump was not going to be the nominee, and it's looking more and more like he will be. But even though I think he is the Republican who will be easiest to beat, the fact that he still could win is so dangerous for the United States that even as a committed member of the Democratic Party, I don't want him to be the Republican. You know, usually I root for the weakest Republican to become the nominee, or either the weakest or the one most to the left, because I'm hoping that he'll pull the Republican Party a little farther to the left so that our politics move farther to the left here in the United States. But this year, I'm just hoping that the semi-fascist guy who seems a little bit like Mussolini and Hitler, that guy, I hope he doesn't win even if he's the weakest nominee. And it's not like he has no chance of winning. And anyway, those were the Marco Rubio clips and the John Kasich clips and the Ted Cruz clips. And that brings us, of course, to the 9 clips of Donald Trump that I'm going to end the broadcast with, except for one clip at the end about the possibility of a Supreme Court nominee in the next few days. I showed 9 Bernie Sanders clips, so hopefully that will be the antidote I gave you in advance for these 9 Donald Trump clips. In this first Donald Trump clip, this is from CNN's, this is from CBS's Face the Nation. John Dickerson does an introduction where he shows some of the violence going on and quotes Donald Trump saying things that kind of incite the violence, and Donald Trump answers that by basically saying, you know, the people who are protesting are bad dudes, and he has some other justifications that are fairly bogus, which I will discuss after you watch that first of 9 Donald Trump clips for the broadcast. Over here.
But the big story this weekend is the anger out on the campaign trail. In Chicago Friday night, thousands of anti-Trump protesters forced Donald Trump to cancel his rally. Then Saturday in Dayton, Ohio, a protester broke through a barricade and rushed the stage at a Trump event, startling the candidate and the crowd. And last night in Kansas City, another round of chaos in the streets. We begin with Donald Trump, who is in Chicago this morning. Mr. Trump, you've said that you don't incite any of this activity, but at several of your rallies, you've said that protesters, you said about one, I'd like to punch him in the face. Another, you suggested that it would be better if he was taken out on a stretcher. You suggested if one thought about throwing a tomato that your supporters should knock the crap out of them. So how is that not encouraging the kind of behavior we're now seeing?
Well, let me just tell you, first of all, with all of the rallies I've had, and I get more people than anybody by, as you know, by a lot, thousands and thousands of people, 25,000 people is almost getting standard. You haven't seen one person even injured at one of our rallies. And the cases you're talking about, the one guy was a bad dude. He was swinging, he was hitting people, he was a very bad guy, and the police came in and they really were very effective. And frankly, some of the audience members had no choice but to be effective, and I didn't mind that at all. Or they would have been hurt, frankly. The other one with the tomatoes, I was told by the Secret Service that there are 2 people in the audience we've heard that have tomatoes and they're going to throw them at you. They have good arms that can do some damage, okay? And I said to the people before my speech started, if you see anybody with tomatoes, you got to take them out, folks. You got to take them out. And I think everybody understands that.
You say no one was hurt, but there was a gentleman who was walking out. The video shows him being escorted out, and then a supporter cold-cocked him. He was hurt, so there was somebody hurt, and he wasn't doing any damage when he was walking out. He was cold-cocked. You had suggested in one of your rallies that you would pay for the legal fees. Will you pay for the legal fees for that gentleman?
Well, I'm going to review it, and I understand, and I don't condone violence, and I don't condone what happened to him and what he did, because he got carried away, and it's very unfortunate. But this kid was walking out, and I understand he had a certain finger up in the air as he's walking out, and this man became very angry. And you know what? Again, I don't condone violence, but the kid shouldn't have had the finger up in the air either, okay, if that's what he did. So I'm going to take a look at the tape, and I'll let you know.
So is that the threshold? Is just the wrong gesture, and it's okay to clock him?
Well, I think that's a terrible gesture, if you want to know the truth. I mean, we can say, oh, it doesn't matter, but I think it's a terrible gesture. And you know, it's interesting. These people are disruptors. They're not protesters. They're disruptors. They're professional disruptors in some cases, but that's all they do. They stand up and they disrupt. And if somebody did that at a Bernie rally, many of these people come from Bernie. And you know, I have tremendous young people also. We have a whole level of young people. I can't even believe it, how young my audience is. But if they ever went to Bernie's rallies and did the same thing, I want to tell you, you would be so angry with me. Nobody talks about it, but you would be so against me. It's a whole different standard when it comes to a Republican conservative versus a liberal. If people went to their rallies and disrupted their rallies like my rallies are disrupted, the press would stick up for them and would make all sorts of excuses about how terrible it is. So, you know, we have 2 standards in this country. It's very unfortunate. The press is extremely dishonest.
When you talk about these protests...
Now, speaking of robo clips where Donald Trump says the same thing over and over again, you'll hear, you know, I tried to avoid duplication, but Donald Trump actually goes to a lot of those same talking points in several of these clips, especially attacking the media as unfair. And he, in several of his interviews, he specifically attacked the outlet he was on in various ways. The next clip actually is, you by the way, you heard in that clip that I think in at least half these clips he claims that there are no injuries at his rallies. And if you're watching the introductory clips for the Republican topic, if you didn't see those, you can click back to the beginning of the topic and check out where I showed several different videos that showed that there were injuries, they were police injuries, there were injuries caused by police, and you can see fights breaking out in the rallies. So there's definitely injuries going on. So that was dishonest. Now I want to go over to a CNN State of the Union clip where Jake Tapper asked Donald Trump specifically about his tweet that's kind of threatening to Bernie Sanders, saying, stop sending your supporters to my rallies, or stop lying about sending your supporters to my rallies, or my supporters could end up at your rallies. And you'll see Donald Trump again uses his trope or his talking point about the media being unfair to him. And I think he specifically talks about CNN being unfair to him, talking to Jake Tapper. This is about 4.5 minutes from this morning's State of the Union on CNN here.
In any case, this morning, sir, you tweeted, Bernie Sanders is lying when he says his disruptors aren't told to go to my events. Be careful, Bernie, or my supporters will go to yours. That sounds like a threat. It doesn't sound like lowering the temperature. It sounds
no, it's not a threat.
Making
it's not a threat.
Perhaps even worse.
It's not a threat at all. Look, my people have said we ought to go to his rallies because, it's sort of interesting. When liberals and super liberals, and I don't even call them liberals because I have many friends that are liberal and I think they're wonderful people. These are beyond liberal. These people are bad people that are looking to do harm to our country. But when these people come into mind, everybody thinks I'm a bad guy. If my people went into one of his rallies, they'd say, oh, this is a terrible thing. They'd be arrested and all sorts of things would happen to them. If conservative Republicans ever went into his rally, you would see things happen that would be unbelievable. And Bernie would be, oh, poor Bernie, isn't that a shame? There's a horrible thing going on in the media. We are treated so unfairly, and I'm treated very unfairly. I mean, this morning you had your political consultant say I had 5,000 people in Dayton, Ohio. Well, I had far more than 5,000 people. We had a hangar that was filled with people. It had to be 10 or 15,000 people.
I guess, Mr. Trump, the point is that people are getting hurt and people are actually concerned that somebody might get seriously, seriously injured before this is all over, and that you are not taking down the temperature. You are, in the views of many of your fellow Republicans, making things worse, inciting, encouraging violence. And you're a leader, sir. You're the front runner of the Republican Party.
Excuse me. My fellow Republicans are running against me. They are losing big league. In Florida, we have a man, Marco Rubio, who doesn't even show up to vote in the U.S. Senate. He's a disgrace. He's weak, very weak on illegal immigration, wants to give amnesty to everybody. He's a person that I don't think he could be elected dog catcher in Florida, frankly, but I'm running against him.
But with all due respect, sir.
If you look at, excuse me, if you look at Ohio, we have a man that voted for NAFTA. NAFTA's destroyed Ohio, and now he's voting for TPP. I mean, in Kasich. And, give me a break. They're running against me. So obviously, if I were in their position, I'd be saying the same thing. We have rallies of 25,000, 30,000 people, and you haven't even said anything about danger in our rallies until Friday. And the danger was ended by a very good managerial decision not to have that particular rally, to postpone it.
I said something about it at the debate on Thursday night because people are worried
Jake,
about it.
you made a statement. Jake, could I ask you a question? You made a statement that at my rallies, it's dangerous. Now, other than for the other day with Chicago and the one man that rushed the stage and Secret Service did a very good job. But other than that, with thousands of people, 21,000, 25,000, 35,000 people a few weeks ago in Alabama, how many people have been injured at my rallies? Zero. There's been nobody injured.
I don't think that it's zero.
But you make it like everybody's being broken down and injured. because CNN reports very, very unfairly about me. I'll tell you what. So out of all of these rallies with thousands and thousands of people, and nobody's even close. By the way, Bernie gets peanuts compared to what we get. And I say we because it's me, and I'm just a messenger, because there is a lot of anger in this country, and it's anger at incompetence. It's anger at the border. It's anger at trade deals that are so bad for us, and all our jobs are being taken out of the country. There is a lot of anger. I didn't need to do this. I have a wonderful life. I have a great, great company. I didn't need to do this. I wanted to do it because somebody has to do it.
I would just ask.
Our country is in trouble.
I hear you, sir. I hear you, sir, about the causes of the anger. I would just ask, as a fellow American, if you could consider whether or not dialing down the temperature, trying to bring down the temperature, might be a healthier thing, both for your campaign and for the nation at large. But that's all the time we have.
Well, if you
Thank
would
you so much
report
for
it
joining us,
right,
Donald Trump.
Well, you should report it right, because we've had no injuries at my events with thousands of people. You just don't report it that way. So, you know, do what you have to do.
Thank you, Mr. Trump.
Thank you.
So that was another Donald Trump attack on the media for misreporting on the lack of injuries at his events. But I think you saw from the reporting I showed at the beginning of this topic that there have been several injuries. There have been police injuries. There have been protester injuries. Of course, there's also the sucker punch that Bill Maher showed at the beginning of his monologue. And I'm going to show now 3 clips from NBC's Meet the Press. The first one is Chuck Todd asking Donald Trump about that sucker punch and about his responsibility. And several parts of this answer are similar to what you've already heard. You already heard him kind of blame the sucker punch on the protester giving the middle finger, which apparently is a reason to hit someone in the face. But then there's also the question of the legal fees, and this is the first of 3 clips from Chuck Todd's Meet the Press interview of Donald Trump. Oh, and I started this clip with Donald Trump talking about his rally in Chicago. There's something he said in several of the interviews. I don't think I actually caught it in any of the clips, where he knows Bernie Sanders was responsible because of the professionally made signs. And so I started this clip with one of the signs of the protesters that is definitely not professionally made, from Meet the Press this morning here.
Everybody dispersed and nobody was injured or hurt or beyond that.
But you know, earlier in the week, and look, earlier in the week there was an incident between a supporter of yours and a protester, and I want to play a piece of sound from a couple weeks ago from you and ask you about it on the other side.
There's a guy totally disruptive, throwing punches. I love the old days. You know what they used to do to guys like that when they were in a place like this? They'd be carried out on a stretcher, folks. Like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you.
Mr. Trump, 17 days later, that actually happened. One of your supporters decided to sucker punch a protester. Do you accept any responsibility for creating this atmosphere?
I don't accept responsibility. I do not condone violence in any shape, and I will tell you, from what I saw, the young man stuck his finger up in the air, and the other man sort of just had it. But I don't condone violence. As far as my previous statement, we had somebody that was punching and vicious and gone crazy, a disruptor. They're not protesters. I'm telling you, they're disruptors. They're professionals. And he went absolutely wild punching. And frankly, when they punch, it's okay. When my people punch back because they have to out of self-defense, everybody says, oh, isn't that terrible? The fact is that we have very peaceful rallies, Chuck. I've had many, many rallies. I have 25,000, 30,000 people coming to rallies. And out of that, we have very, very little problem. We haven't had a real injury or anything. And then Chicago, I canceled. And I did a great thing by canceling it, because who needs the problems? Who needs people getting hurt? I didn't want that.
But when you
say, instead of getting...
But Mr. Trump, when you say, you know, if you see somebody getting ready to throw a tomato, knock the crap out of them, seriously, just knock the hell out of them. I promise you I will pay for their legal fees. How is that not condoning what this older gentleman did to this protester?
Well, let me explain what happened. We were told before just as I was going up on the stage, I was told by the Secret Service, sir, there's a person or two people in the audience that have tomatoes. They are going to throw them at you, we think. If they do throw them, you have to be prepared. Now, you get hit in the face with a tomato, let me tell you, with somebody with a strong arm, at least, let me tell you, it can be very damaging, not good. So I was told people were in the audience, two people with tomatoes, that they're going to throw them at me. What I did is I say, by the way, if you see anybody with tomatoes right at the beginning, you got to stop them, do whatever you want to do. I have no objection to what I said. I would say it again. People are there doing harm. You have to go and you have to use equal force.
I'm just curious.
It's not fair. It's a one-way street.
I'm just curious. Do you plan on paying for the legal fees of this older gentleman in North Carolina who sucker punched the protester?
Well, I'm not aware. I will say this. I do want to see what that young man was doing because he was very taunting. He was very loud, very disruptive. And from what I understand, he was sticking a certain finger up in the air. And that is a terrible thing to do in front of somebody that, frankly, wants to see America made great again. And so we'll see. I'm going to take a look at it. But I want to see what that man was doing.
And that condones a sucker punch, though?
No, as I told you before, nothing condones, but I want to see. The man got carried away. Right. He was 78 years old. He obviously loves this country, and maybe he doesn't like seeing what's happening to the country. I want to see the full tape.
So you
but
might
I don't
pay
condone
for his legal
violence.
fees.
I don't. Well, I'm going to look at it. I'm going to see, you know, what was behind this because it was a strange event. But from what I heard, there was a lot of taunting and a certain finger was placed in the air. Not nice. Again, I don't condone the violence. I don't condone what he did. But you know what?
So it's possible
not nice
you could,
on the other side either.
It's possible you could help him with legal fees if this man needs it.
I've actually instructed my people to look into it, yes.
Okay, I want to ask you about...
So, like I said, that kind of overlaps. There is some duplicative parts to Donald Trump's answer there to some of the ones I showed previously. One thing he talked about with Chuck Todd he didn't talk about on the other interviews was this claim that the person who rushed the stage and the Secret Service had to protect him from this guy, that he was connected to ISIS. You know, you saw that in the introductory clips. A couple of the different networks showed this guy rushing the stage in somewhere in Ohio. I can't remember which one of Donald Trump's rallies in Ohio. He had this guy come. And there is a video on YouTube somewhere that shows the guy who rushed the stage with like Arabic music in the background and with ISIS flags around him. But you'll see in this clip that Chuck Todd isn't completely prepared to ask the question because he hasn't actually watched the video and then the original video, because the original video is the guy who rushed the stage dragging a flag along the ground because it was a protest at a college having to do, you know, it was like "Not My Flag," and then some unknown people took that video and then added in the Arabic music and the ISIS flags for the ISIS connection. And you'll see Chuck Todd doesn't know all of that, so he can't really pin Donald Trump down on what he said that was untrue, which is that the person who rushed the stage had ISIS ties, which really isn't quite the same as having dragged a flag on the ground. You know, that's not quite as dangerous to the national security. But Donald Trump gets away with not really addressing his original claim and moving on to his new claim, as he often does, talking to Chuck Todd over in this clip.
About the moment yesterday in Dayton, looked like a scary moment, being rushed to the stage. I want to ask you, you said you praised the Secret Service, but then you said the man had ties to ISIS. That turned out to be a hoax. Did you go over the top there on that? Where did you get evidence?
No. He was. If you look on the internet, if you look at the clips, when he's dragging an American flag.
Somebody made that up, sir.
He had talk. Well, I don't know what they made up. All I can do is play what's there. He was walking, dragging the American flag on the ground. Is that a correct statement? Was that a hoax too? Was he dragging the flag on the ground and just dragging it along?
I'm talking about the ISIS
Well, you didn't see the
tweet.
clip. No,
We're playing the clip right now.
You didn't see the clip. He was playing Arabic music. He was dragging the flag along the ground, and he had internet chatter with ISIS and about ISIS. So I don't know if he was or not, but all we did was put out what he had on his internet. He's dragging the flag, the American flag, which I respect obviously more than you. He was dragging the American flag on the ground like it was a piece of garbage, okay? I don't like that, and a lot of people don't like that. And he also had chatter about ISIS or with ISIS, and you take a look at it. I mean, people are looking at it very seriously now, but you have to check it before you ask the question.
Well, no, that's what we have checked it. That's my point, sir. There's no ties to ISIS for this man, no law enforcement official, and this video that you linked to appears to be a hoax.
Okay, you just, look, well, was it a hoax that he's dragging the flag? Was that him? It looked like the same man to me. He was dragging a flag along the ground, and he was playing a certain type of music, and supposedly there was chatter about ISIS. Now, I don't know. What do I know about it? All I know is what's on the internet, and I don't like to see a man dragging the American flag along the ground in a mocking fashion.
All right, I want to...
All I know is what I hear on the internet. Well, has Donald Trump ever said anything more true than that? And the whole thing, I mentioned that Donald Trump is like attacking the press in every single interview. Did you hear like about a minute from the end of that clip, he says to Chuck Todd, I obviously care about the flag more than you do. And Chuck Todd never even responded to that one. And like I said before I showed the clip, he apparently didn't know which part of the video was a hoax and which part wasn't, because the dragging the flag was real. The Arabic music and the ISIS ties were fake. And because he didn't know the difference, I don't think he did the best job making Donald Trump responsible for the parts that were actually a hoax. And Donald Trump even kind of obfuscated a little there and talked about the music and the ties to ISIS and never completely backed off of that. Before I leave the Chuck Todd interview of Donald Trump, the last question that he asked is showing him a clip of Senator Marco Rubio saying that Donald Trump is afraid to tell his supporters to back off because that's what is his connection to his supporters. And Donald Trump doesn't really answer the question. He really just kind of attacks Senator Marco Rubio, as you might expect. And let me make sure I get the right one here. Over clip number 35 here.
Rubio said some pretty tough things about you yesterday. I want to play it and get you to react to it on the other side.
He doesn't want to say anything to his supporters because he doesn't want to turn them off, because he understands that the reason why they are voting for him is because he has tapped into this anger. And when the person you're supporting for president is going around saying things like, go ahead and slap him around, I'll pay your legal fees, what do you think's going to happen next? Someone's going to actually literally believe it and take it upon themselves.
Is Marco Rubio right? Are you afraid to tell your supporters to back off?
Look, first of all, Marco Rubio has the worst voting record in the United States Senate in many, many years. He doesn't even show up to vote. He's defrauded the people of Florida. He won't even show up to vote. And I want to tell you, for him to be talking like that is absolutely a shame. I have great support. I have great supporters, far greater than you understand. The fact is, if you look at the polls going in for the primaries, if you look and the caucuses, we're up 65 and 70%. Some are up 102%. Millions and millions of people are energized. They're going in and voting. And by the way, that's not for Marco Rubio, and it's not for Sen Ted Cruz. That's for Trump. I mean, they're there. They're voting for Trump because they want to see America be made great again.
But I want to button this up.
Our country's in big trouble.
I understand that, but I want to button this up a little bit because this violence on the campaign trail, it's got a lot of people concerned. And I guess, why won't you go up on stage and ratchet it back? I mean, you've used rhetoric about Islam hates us, surveillance of certain mosques, calling Mexican immigrants rapists. What did you expect? A lot of people say you're reaping what you sow here, that the reason there's so much tension at your rallies is you've used such divisive rhetoric. Do you have any regrets?
The reason there's tension at my rallies is that these people are sick and tired of this country being run by incompetent people that don't know what they're doing on trade deals where our jobs are being ripped out of our country, Chuck. They're being ripped out. On ISIS, where we can't even beat ISIS with our military. Our military is not being taken care of. We can't even beat ISIS. On our vets, who are being treated horribly. Frankly, they're being treated worse than illegal immigrants. The people are angry at that. They're not angry about some something I'm saying. I'm just a messenger. The people are angry about the fact that for 12 years, the workers in this country haven't had a pay increase, Chuck. In 12 years, they haven't had an effective pay increase.
So you will not,
and that's what they're angry about.
You will not call for ratcheting back the rhetoric. You will not call for it.
Well, I haven't said anything. That I'm just expressing my opinion. What have I said that's wrong? I mean, I talk about illegal immigration. I talk about building a wall. I say Mexico's going to pay for the wall, which they will. Okay. And all of these things. I mean, what have I said that's wrong? You tell me. The fact is they're really upset with the way our country is being run. It's a disgrace.
I will leave it there. Mr. Trump, stay safe on the trail, and we'll watch you Tuesday.
So that's what I'm going to show from Chuck Todd's interview of Donald Trump. I think I pretty much gave my commentary on that before I showed the clip. Now I want to move on to 4 clips of Donald Trump from Fox News Sunday before I get to that last clip on the Supreme Court. In this first clip, I think Chris Wallace does a good job of phrasing a question on Donald Trump's "Islam hates us" quote, where he moves forward from the debate clip roundup I showed from the Republicans where Donald Trump tried to answer this. Here, Chris Wallace kind of incorporates the answers of the other Republicans about how he's taking a tiny minority of Muslims and he's doing things that are going to hurt our foreign policy. But Donald Trump's answer has a familiar citation for those of you who are fans of Bill Maher's arguments about Islam, as I will discuss after you watch that clip over here.
Also created a controversy this week with your comments about Islam. Here they are.
I think Islam hates us. There's something there that there's a tremendous hatred there. There's a tremendous hatred. We have to get to the bottom of it.
Now, Mr. Trump, there are 1.6 billion Muslims in the world today. 1.6 billion, and according to the best experts, think tanks all around the world, they say at most 100,000 people are fighting for jihadist causes. That's it's a tiny fraction of 1%. So why draw a battle line against an entire religion, including major countries that are helping us in the fight against ISIS?
You're saying that out of 1.5 billion, 100,000, right? Let me tell you, whoever did that survey was about as wrong as you can get. It's 27%, could be 35%. Would go to war. The hatred is tremendous, Chris. Now look,
wait. You're saying 250. You're saying 250, 300 million Muslims would go to war against us.
Why don't you take a look at the Pew poll that came out very recently, or fairly recently, where I think the number, I mean, I could be corrected, and it's whatever it is, but it was something like 27% are, really very militant about, going after things. And you'll have to take a look at it. They did a very strong study. And let's see what it says. But it's a very significant number. It's not 100,000 people, I can tell you that. It's a ridiculous number. But look, there's something going on, Chris, whether you like it or not. It would be a lot easier for me just to say, oh, no, everybody loves us. But there's something going on. There's a big problem. And radical Islamic terrorism is taking place all over the world. You look at what happened at Paris. You look at what happened.
The Pew poll. That's right. For those of you who loved the Pew poll when Bill Maher was citing it to support his views, do you like it when Donald Trump is saying the Pew poll is the reason that he's right about Muslims? Well, I spent enough time critiquing the Pew poll last week when Bill Maher was citing it. I don't think I have to go over the Pew poll again, but I thought it was kind of interesting to see that Donald Trump is using the same sources as Bill Maher to support his somewhat similar views on Muslims, although Bill Maher was trying to differentiate his views on Muslims from Donald Trump's views on Muslims last week. But I want to move on to the next Chris Wallace question that I also thought was a pretty good question. It's following up on something that Donald Trump said that I showed in my debate clip roundup from last Friday, that Donald Trump moved off his more dovish stance on Middle East ground troops and actually said 20 or 30,000 ground troops for Iraq and Syria, which I believe what I said when I did my clip roundup from the debate was that that's like a Quagmire level commitment. And apparently Donald Trump has also realized that, because he claims he never really said he was going to do that. It was just something he heard, and it's kind of like what he heard on the internet. He won't say who he heard it from, but he kind of heard it and thought maybe we'd have to do it, but they're chopping off heads. Don't forget, they're chopping off heads.
Said this about the war on ISIS.
We have to knock out ISIS. We have to knock the hell out of them. I would listen to the generals, but I'm hearing numbers of 20 to 30,000.
Which generals have told you, sir, that we need 20 to 30,000 U.S. ground troops in Iraq and Syria?
Well, that's what I heard the number. That doesn't mean I do that, by the way, but that's what I heard the number is in order to eradicate, and it could be quick. You know, maybe we should do something quickly because this cancer is staying with us forever. I mean, we've been fighting in the Middle East now for 15 years and longer.
But all the generals we talked to say that's
spending money at a rate, and in the Chris, and in the meantime, our infrastructure in our country is going to hell. Our country is in trouble, and all we do is spend money in the Middle East. I mean, either eradicate them or get out. I mean, what we're doing is crazy. We don't have
But
any
all the generals that I've spoken to say
ridiculous.
20 to 30,000. I mean, yes, we may need more troops there. We may need forward observers. We may need people, special forces to help Iraqi ground troops. But putting 20 to 30,000 American troops back in Iraq and Syria, they have grave doubts about that, sir.
I'm not saying do it. I'm saying that's a number that I heard you would need. And I never said do it. I said that's a number that you may need. But look, let me tell you something. Whether you like it or not, I was against the war in Iraq, okay? I'm one that said don't go in. You're going to destabilize the Middle East. I was totally right about that. So I'm not like this big war hawk. But now you have people chopping off heads. You have people drowning, 40 and 50 people in steel cages at a time, Chris. And now we have to do something. And the reason we have to do it is because of the power of weaponry. They're looking to get weapons, and they're looking to acquire weapons that are going to be very, very horrible for our country if they ever do it.
Mr. Trump,
and we have to eradicate.
So I thought that was a pretty tough question from Chris Wallace for Donald Trump on his ground troops answer from the debate. And you see he kind of backed off the 20 or 30,000 ground troops that, you know, wasn't something he was really going to do. And I want to show one more tough question from Chris Wallace. And this is because I said that I would show Donald Trump attacking the press in almost every interview. Here you can see he's attacking Fox News for what they did to him in the Fox News debate, the civil debate that I did the clip roundup on. And this is on Trump University and how they said that Trump University got a D- from the Better Business Bureau. And here's Donald Trump responding to all that and attacking Megyn Kelly obliquely and Fox News directly over in this clip.
I ask you, Trump University, I don't have to tell you, has become something of an issue in the campaign trail with some former students saying it's a scam. Here was one of them.
I was trumped by Trump. I was duped by the Donald.
But you put out a video this week in which you showed that same man's report card about Trump University.
Here's his report card on the school, the quality of presentation, quality of everything. Excellent, 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 all excellence, 100%.
But now the New York Times reports that that man, Robert Guillow, says that he was pressured to give those report card grades, the excellence, by his instructor who said he'd be fired if he didn't get them. And the Times talked to other students who say that they came under a lot of pressure to give you good reports.
Oh, really? And they did that with 10,000 people? Let me just tell you, this is a law firm. It's a class action firm. They sue a lot of people. They're trying to get money. I don't settle cases. I will go to court all day long with this case. Almost everybody in there has given report cards saying it was excellent. We have an A from the Better Business Bureau, and you didn't report it on the show. In the debate, you did something very dishonest. You didn't report it. You told me, and you told the whole world watching the debate,
first of all,
that we had
sir,
a D,
and
we didn't have a D.
Sir, you know as well as I do.
Excuse me.
I didn't ask the question. And
I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about Fox.
Okay.
I gave you the report card. I gave you the A during the debate because they said it was a D and it was an A. And I gave you the A from Better Business Bureau.
But don't you think we have the responsibility to check it out, to
said,
find out what's going on? And the fact is, it's a little more complicated than that because Trump University has been out of business for several years, so they're not getting so many
No,
complaints.
not out of business. It's not out of business. It's suspended until I win the lawsuit.
Okay.
And after I win the lawsuit, hopefully I'll be in the White House and I'll have my kids, my kids will open it up.
But I promise you, if Marco Rubio gave us a
suspended.
piece of paper in the middle of a debate, we're not going to simply start reading that.
Oh, I think you would. I think you would. Actually, here's the story. You said Better Business Bureau gave me a D. I said that's wrong. I got, during an intermission, I called in. They sent the A rating. I got an A rating from Better Business. I handed it to Megyn Kelly, and they refused to put it on. That is not honest.
I think it's just wanting to check the facts. But in any case, let me answer.
So there's Donald Trump attacking Fox News for not being fair on Trump U and the Better Business Bureau, but having shown three tough questions for Donald Trump from Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday this morning. I want to show at least that the complaining about the press worked on Fox News, where Chris Wallace actually ended by specifically asking him an easy, nice softball question. And Donald Trump was semi-satisfied for the last Donald Trump question, or the last Donald Trump clip of the broadcast over here.
You're going to like this last question, so bear with me on this.
All
because
right.
For all of the controversies...
Sure, I love it.
I promise you will. Here, you can tell me afterwards whether you like this question. For all the controversies, you are doing very well right now. You have a solid lead in the delegates, and as you have pointed out, turnout is up considerably. There's a 67% increase in votes in Republican contests over 2012, up 67%, 23% down in Democratic turnout compared to 2008. You say that you have been leading a movement, and I want to briefly, we have less than a minute, explore that with you. What's the movement? What do these people want? And what are the chances that you could effectively lock up this race on Tuesday? Now, wasn't that a nice question?
Well, I think I like that question. I like the statement, too. I'm glad we're finishing with this. Look, people have been disenfranchised in this country. Great people, phenomenal people, people that have built this country. They've been totally disenfranchised. Trade deals have taken away their jobs all over. Our military can't beat ISIS. Our veterans are being treated horribly. Our health care is horrible with Obamacare, where premiums are going up like nobody's ever seen before, 45, 55%. There are so many things wrong with our country, and I'm going to straighten it out. And people understand that. We're going to straighten it out, and we're going to make America great again, and that's what it's all about. And there's never been, they say, in the history of this country, what's happening right now. And by the way, it's been very friendly with no injuries, no injuries. I mean, if I listen to you, it's like everybody, like it's a rampage. There's been no injuries, Chris. Remember that. No injuries. And we did a good job by postponing the other day in Chicago. No injuries, Chris.
Mr. Trump, thank you. Thanks for your time, and I hope you and all the people attending your rallies stay safe on the campaign trail, sir.
Thank you very much.
Up next, John.
I can't believe that Donald Trump is like so proud that his rallies, his big talking point for his rallies, no injuries, no injuries. Like, if that's the best thing you can say about your rallies, and it's not even true, as I talked about at the beginning and all throughout the Republican side, and that's the end of the topic, the Republican side of the debate. You can let me know what you think about those 9 Donald Trump clips, whether they balanced out the 9 Bernie Sanders clips I showed at the beginning. And I'm almost going to finish up the program now, but before I leave, I wanted to preview what may be a big news story in the next few days, which is President Obama's Supreme Court nominee, which hopefully the Republican Senate will take up in hearings, although so far they've said they won't, which is kind of the basis of this report on this week's with George Stephanopoulos on ABC with their reporter Terry Moran in the final clip from the broadcast tonight here.
Supreme Court. President Obama has narrowed his list to 3 finalists. The pick could come any day, and ABC's Terry Moran has more on the potential nominees.
And then there were 3. Merrick Garland, Chief Judge of the Federal Appeals Court in D.C., Sri Srinivasan, also serving on the Federal Appeals Court in Washington, and Paul Watford, a Federal Appeals Court judge in California. Resume diversity, not so much. But Srinivasan would be the first Asian American on the court, and Watford only the 3rd African American. Another common trait, they were all confirmed with support from Senate Republicans. So, can President Obama convince Senate Republicans to hold confirmation hearings?
Everybody knows any nominee submitted in the middle of this presidential campaign isn't getting confirmed. Everybody knows that.
History offers a contrast. 17 presidents, including 5 in the 20th century, successfully put justices on the court during an election year. So when? The nomination could come as soon as tomorrow, and likely before the president makes his historic trip to Cuba next week. Republicans, though, are still holding firm that this vacancy should be filled by the next president.
It is today the American people who are best positioned to help make this important decision.
We answer to the American people.
And the American people.
That has at least one Republican nervous.
In the unlikely event we lose the White House, Hillary Clinton's going to be president. She's going to pick somebody probably more liberal than President Obama's going to send over in a few days.
With a Donald Trump nomination looking ever more likely, could the GOP Senate decide to dance with the devil it knows and consider Obama's pick? For this week, Terry Moran, ABC.
So that would be kind of cool if Donald Trump scared the Senate Republicans into actually considering an Obama nominee. And I like how Terry Moran did sort of an oblique reference to history there to criticize the Republican position. And I would really like to cover the Judiciary Committee doing hearings on a Supreme Court nominee. So hopefully that will happen. I'm way over time. I have to finish up the show. If you want to support me, especially with all the advertising problems, you can click right up here to be do fan funding directly through YouTube, or down in the video description to become a patron on Patreon. I will be back next Sunday doing the same clip roundup. I don't know what I'll do between now and then, but until I can get something else back up on YouTube, I guess I'll be seeing all of you around the internet.